Alrighty, so it's been a while since I've last done a video, and the reason that is the case is I've been relatively sick in these last couple days. In fact, I actually lost my voice on Monday, and it just sort of recovered back on Thursday, and you can kind of still hear my voice kind of crackly a little bit, which is why for this video I have my water here. I'll be drinking this throughout the video so that my voice doesn't sound really crackly, though it might sound as we get near the end of the video because this is going to be a bit of a long one as we're going to do the emotion index of April. And as always, in terms of the top tiers, we got everything is coming up strong. This is where fan base of these certain teams feel like, oh, this has been an absolutely amazing start to the season, and maybe even some are starting to think about playoffs already, even though we're only a third into the season. There's the second tier where there's going to be some families feel like they're getting off to a good start and they're still doing well. Then we get the mid tier, which is a bit mediocre slash confused. So this is kind of the tier where certain fan base feel like, well, it's been a bit mediocre and that it's kind of confusing at times where we don't know if we're actually a playoff team or we're not really a playoff team and things are going to drop off. The fourth tier, obviously, are teams that are not getting off to a good start, definitely not having a good time, as these are the fan base that feel like, yeah, this has been a bad start to the season. But the fifth tier is probably the worst tier for any teams that have fan base feel like this, which is the panic tier. As we're now one into the season, I think it is a good sample size to open up the panic tier. This is where can again some of these fan base are already panicking, and already some of these teams that belong in this category are already they dig themselves into a deep hole that it's going to be hard for them to dig themselves out in order to make it to the playoffs or at least get to their expectation this season. So with that being said, let us begin and we start with alphabetical order with Atlanta United. Yeah, for Atlanta, it's definitely not having a good time. Wow, this last month has been rough for Atlanta, and again, I've said this before. This is very similar to what we saw last season, where Atlanta, they kind of got off to a bit of a shaky start the first 2 weeks, but then it got better, and then the infamous Atlanta is back kind of thing is being said in the Atlanta United fan base, and then things just kind of collapse after that, and we're starting to see the same thing once again. And what's even worse for Atlanta is the fact that they're about to go through a relatively tough stretch, and with the way that there's a lot of pressure that this team should be better, especially with the talent that they have, and not to mention there have been some underachieving in terms of this team as well. I mean, Thiago Almada has been nowhere near the level that he was last season. Jakob Marquez, he did perform relatively well doing the good run that Atlanta has, but even then, he hasn't really been himself as well. And then not to mention, the midfield and defense has been shaky at time as well. And as a result of that, I mean, you get what Atlanta is getting right now. They haven't won a single game going back to March. And again, this is a team that there's high expectation that this team should be competing in the Eastern Conference, and I think it's all Pineda knows it too. Even Carlos Bocanegra knows it too, because if this team does not compete for the Eastern Conference, let alone making playoffs. Obviously, making the playoffs is the bare minimum, but if this team is not considered to be a team that compete in the East, those two guys I mentioned, Pineda and Okanega, they could be seeing the door, and they could be seeing the door relatively quick if that is not the case. Then we move on to Austin. Yeah, I gotta say, for Austin, I think their fan base is, I think they're a combination of confused, but also just feel absolutely ecstatic because I don't know how this team keep doing this. I don't know how in the world with all those underlying number that kind of goes against them. And obviously, I usually don't talk about underlying numbers and all those expectancy goals and stuff like that because I think that's just kind of pure stats at time. But even then, when you also look at those numbers, this team should be near the bottom of the Western Conference, and yet somehow in some way this feels like it's very similar to their second season, just kind of outperforming their underlying number. Just guys are just kind of starting to play over their heads a little bit, and yeah, as a result, they are they're basically where they are. I will say that a part of the fact that they're playing over the heads, Brad Stuver. I mean, Brad Stuver right now. I mean, I know, no, it is still really relatively early days, but he's probably maybe even considered to be goalkeeper of the year with the way that how many times he has bailed out this team and have stolen points for this Austin FC team. And that, yeah, again, like I said, with how disastrous the start of the season, I don't think any Austin fans would have imagined the fact that in the last 6 games, they have got points 5 of the last 6 games, and prior to that 0-0 draw that they had against Austin, they won 4 out of their last 5 and has really risen themselves into the playoffs. Now, is it the same though? Absolutely not. But honestly, Austin fans won't care. They'll enjoy the good time right now until maybe that's when eventually reality is going to set in, and that again, it's hard to believe with how bad the this team has, especially on the road too. I mean, on the road, there's been just multiple games where they just kind of park the bus and refuse to shoot, but they maybe get like a lucky goal there or a lucky break goes their way, and that's kind of where Austin is right now, just really way overperforming what where they should be, and I think their families will be happy because of that. Next we go to Charlotte. I think it's gonna be right here in the middle, where it's been a bit mediocre slash confused. I think the confused part is the fact that is this team maybe good enough to compete with the big boys, or they're gonna start to have a drop off because the talent, of course, it is going it's just not enough to compete. I think you could say both, of course, is true if the fan base is asking for it. But that being said, I think you could say that Charlotte has had a good season, and I think that their new head coach Dean Smith, he's done a really good job with this team. Considering how limited resource this team has, I think he's gotten the best out of this team, and that I think that's kind of what you see right now. It's gonna be interesting to see whether in the summer they're gonna add more pieces, especially now there's rumor that Enzo Capetti might be moving on from this team, so they might put in a new DP spot and maybe get that DP number 9 that they need, or just any DP kind of attacker that they need that really can help booster this team. Because while this team I think has done much better in terms of their defensive front compared to last season, they still lack a lot of talent on the attack, and that's kind of what kind of holds them back and just kind of put them in this mediocre category that their fan base feel like it is. Now, moving on to Chicago. Yeah, you know, Chicago is kind of in the panic category, though. I don't think any Fire fans are kind of panicking about this team, mainly because that's kind of what you expect from the Chicago Fire. It feels like this has been a very Chicago Fire kind of season where they get off to a slow start, and do not be surprised if somehow this team will get off to a decent run in the middle of summer, and that Fire fans will basically warn you that yeah, that's just kind of a cock tease that they do every single season before they have their usual collapse in September. So, yeah, we'll see if that, of course, is the case. I mean, if that is not the case, I don't think that's even better. I mean, just simply they've been bad right now, and that I do believe that right now the curse is definitely real for this Fire team. It just feels like no matter what they do, no matter the amount that they spend to trying to improve the squad, it just have not worked whatsoever, and it's just getting to a point where that's they're in one of the toughest situation you can imagine, where you know you want to rebuild, but the problem is that you tried to do this multiple times and it just doesn't work. And again, I go back to saying about the narrative of this Fire team. That's been the narrative of this team. This team have always follow this narrative, and that this is where again it's tough to be a fan of team, and I know it too. As a Quakes fan, I know that the Chicago Fire are going for the same narrative as the Quakes. A team just been going from mediocrity at best kind of period for the past decades or so, and it feels like it's going to be the same thing this year as well. Then we go to FC Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati will be right here. I think their fan base will feel like they're doing well. Obviously, I think Cincinnati is kind of having a season very similar to last year as well, where there's still question in terms of the goal scoring department, but they've been very good on the defensive front. The defense is kind of the reason why they're where they are in the standings, and I argue this defense is even better than what we saw last season. I mean, the signing of Miles Robinson has worked as a treat, and you could argue he could be in running for Defensive Player of the Year already in the early part of the season. Obviously, again, they just need to figure out their goal scoring, and again, them recently signing a Venezuelan player from Shakhtar. Hopefully, he'll get some minutes for this team, and maybe even in the summer they might even think about getting another DP kind of attacker, because obviously it feels like Bupenza is not the answer for this team, at least for these next couple of months, because he's gonna be out for these next couple of months because of a broken jaw. So yeah, again, I think Cincinnati fans are happy where their team is, but they know it could be better, and they're hoping that it's going to be like last season, where they kind of struggle early on in terms of the attack, and then boom, it hits as the season goes along. Then we go to Colorado. Yeah, I think Rapids fans are very happy with their team right now. I mean, again, this is a team that I know they made a lot of changes, a lot of improvement to this team, and then of course getting Chris Armas as well, which was a questionable move at time, but right now it feels like it's hitting. This team really kind of reminds me a little bit of last year's Houston team, where it was a Dynamo team that made some moves in the offseason, really improved the team, and they also had hire a guy that was a questionable hire at time with Van Olsen, but he has really done well with that team, and they only went all the way to the Western Conference Final and winning the U.S. Open Cup. Now, I'm not saying the Colorado Rapids are going to be that team that reached to the Western Conference Final, or even winning a U.S. Open Cup, but I will say that Chris Armas has done a great job with this team. And the goal scoring, that's been a big question for this Rapids team. That even though that they don't really have that true goal scorer of this team, guys have basically contribute. I mean, guys like Cole Bassett started to find his goal scoring for again, and even their DP number 9 Rafael Navarro, a guy that has been just simply cursed in terms of scoring from open play. Once that he's now scored open play goal, he has now scored or in the last couple of games as well. So it feels like they finally figured out that part of the game, which I thought that was going to be the thing that would hold them back, and with the way that they figured that out, it's no surprise the Rapids have really improved this season under Chris Armas. Then we move on to Columbus. Yeah, Columbus is gonna be right here. And I know obviously their league form has not been very well, but that's mainly because they're in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And honestly, what they did in the CONCACAF Champions Cup is something that we have not seen an MLS team done in a very long time. I even said that this is probably the most impressive run I've ever seen a MLS team gone through in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Probably even better than what we saw with TFC back in 2018. I mean, I know TFC did pull off some big victory in their CONCACAF Champions Cup run. I mean, they beat the likes of Tigres. I mean, America doing that run, but doing that run that TFC had into the final, um, they didn't do what Columbus did, which is winning back-to-back time down in Mexico against two of the giants of the CONCACAF region, and two teams that has just been absolutely a killer for MLS team in Tigres and Rayados, and the fact that they took care of both of them handily, and now they have a chance to win this competition and becoming the second MLS team to do so under this iteration, going back to the CONCACAF Champions League. I don't care what they've done in terms of the league play. What Wilfred Nancy has done with this team in this competition, this is going to be a run that I think is going to be remembered for a very long time. And that if they do win this, I would say that this is even more impressive than we saw the Seattle Sounders did. And this is nothing to diss the Seattle Sounders in terms of their glory into the CONCACAF champion league a couple of years ago, but what Columbus is doing, and in terms of some of the ways that they're able to move on to the next round, is something we have never seen an MLS team done in the competition history. So yeah, Columbus, no doubt, at the number one spot. Then we go to DC. For DC, it's kind of right here where it's kind of similar to Charlotte, where they're getting a bit mediocre this season under their new head coach, but still their new head coach is doing everything and really getting the best out of the team. Oh, I will say that unlike Charlotte, at least DC does have some attacking talent. I mean, Christian Benteke still scoring goals, like what we seen last season. Even Mateus Clay, definitely uh defeating Father Time right now, performing very well throughout the season. But the reason why, this season it's been kind of a bit mediocre and in some way almost frustrating if you're a DC fans, is the fact that they have a lot of games where they drop points and couldn't hold on to reserve. I mean, this is kind of a team very similar to another team that I'll mention a little bit later in this emotion index, where they could have been much better right now if they can hold on to this resort sword and let points slip away. And that's going to be the next thing that Troy is saying. We'll try to get to this team where while they play some great soccer throughout this season. They also want to play that throughout the full 90 minutes and close out resorts so it shows. And I've said also before that I think DC, in terms of how they play this season, it has not really replicated in terms of the number of points they have. They really play well, and it's just unfortunate that they just couldn't get the some of the resort even in some of these games that they drawn and losses. And we'll see whether or not if that will reflect itself as the season goes along. Then we go to FC Dallas. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious that it's in the panic category. I mean, Dallas fans, I don't blame the fact that they're chanting Nico Estevez to be fired from this team, because I will say that as bad as the season has gone for Dallas, I don't think this is all on Nico Estevez. Yes, I know some of the tactics that he's been using hasn't been great whatsoever, but I also think that it's a lot to do with just so much underachieving that is going on right now. I mean, similar to the Chicago Fire after signing a number nine, a DP number nine, in 10+ million figure. The same goes for Dallas, with them signing a 10+ million number nine. In Chicago it's Hugo Kuipers. For Dallas is Pedro Musa, and both of them has really struggled in the beginning of the season. But also, it's not to mention, I think the other thing that that is kind of the reason why Dallas is really struggling right now is not just the fact that they can't score goals. The defense has not been great. And that I think is even more alarming now. The fact that this team for the past couple of years, the reason why they've always been competitive is because the defense has been very good, and even their goalkeeper Martin Paz is considered to be one of the top elite goalkeeper in the league. That has not happened this year. And as a result, when you have a team that can't score and also have a very leaky defense and a goalkeeper that definitely they are not having a good season, that's where you see Dallas right now in the panic category. And that once Alan Velasco does come back to the team, we'll see whether or not if it will improve. I think it will definitely improve if he can play the way that he has pre-torn ACL injury that he suffered in the playoffs. But still, even if he does fire on all kinds of cylinder, I still have a lot of question in terms of the defense of this team. That again, it's hard to believe how much of a drop off that they had this season compared to what we saw last season and the previous season as well. Then we go to the Houston Dynamo. I would say Houston is kind of right here, where I think that they will consider that they're still doing well, considering that where they are in the standing right now, and consider they're a little bit short on the talent front, and not to mention missing their DP number 10 in Hector Herrera for majority of the season, and he just got back recently, and you can kind of tell that he's still trying to get himself back to match fitness and back to that competitive edge that or competitive sharpness that he had last season, and that the fact that Houston is still surviving just like that, I think that's again just shows you how good of a job that Ben Olsen is doing in terms of keeping this team competitive. Now that being said, though, they definitely need to make some more signings and add some reinforcement this summer, because again, it's no surprise the fact that the Dynamo has regressed a little bit last season compared to this year, mainly because when you don't make any improvement into your roster, just like what we saw the Dynamo did this season, it's no surprise that they're taking a step back. Like every single season, there's a reason why teams usually add some more players and add some reinforcement. Like unless you are a really good team or you're the Columbus Crew, you always need to add some more reinforcement to better as the season goes along because other team is gonna also add reinforcements. So we'll see whether or not if the Dynamo can do that in the summer. I mean, I'm pretty sure their fans are begging that that is the case because I think this all season just kind of makes Dynamo fans reminds the old regime of of a team that just doesn't spend whatsoever, doesn't really reinvest the team, even though the talent is there, and they end up not going back to being basement dweller, just like what we saw a couple of years ago. Not saying that this is going to be the case this season, but you know what Ben Olsen is doing and what the Dynamo in terms of the lack of talent that they have, but still getting points despite that. That can only work so long until it doesn't as the season goes along. Then we go to Montreal. Um, this is a tough one. I would say they're right here where I think they're also still doing well, but they're kind of falling in the category of the bit mediocre slash confused. And you know, I will say that you know I'll give Montreal a big pass with the way that they haven't been playing well, mainly because they've been really been hitting hard in terms of the injury bug. I mean, you talk about a team that is pretty much already maybe earned the title of being the most stake bitten team in terms of injury. Montreal is definitely that team. I mean, they already lost Kokoro, their main number 9, and then you know they also have Joseph Martinez sidelined for a bit. Bottom line is this team is battling in injuries, and you know I will say that Laurent Courtois he's doing his best in terms of sort of getting the best out of this team, despite that this team doesn't have a lot of depth, and not to mention, you know, off the field situation with their recent GM being let go in a very controversial way. That doesn't really help their case as well. But once they do get those players back, eventually, I would expect this Montreal team to be better, and especially the fact that they have a lot of home games too. Again, you know, it's hard to believe that they got on that 6 game road trip and they only got like two home games in return of it. They're gonna have a lot of home games in the middle of the season, and if Montreal can follow the same form that they were last season at home under Hunter Lasada, which was a really good home team, I think this team should be able to make it to the playoffs and should be a team that will be borderline in terms of competing in the Eastern Conference. Then we go to oh God, I just realized I skipped a bunch of team, didn't I? Yeah, I skipped a bunch of teams. So let's of course track back a little bit and talk about Sporting KC. And yeah, I mean, pretty sure Sporting KC, their fans can agree that they're definitely not having a good time. I mean, I know some Sporting KC fans will be kind of like right here in the panic kind of category. They're very close in terms of it. If they keep blowing leads and keep giving up late goals, like they do for the past couple of games, they're definitely going to be in the panic category. But still, you know, it's just been a very frustrating and just almost a season that is very similar to what we saw with the Columbus Crew under the final season under Caleb Porter and what we saw with the Portland Timbers in 2020, and even what we saw with Christian Latanzio's Charlotte team last season. Just constant games of blowing leads, and that you know when you're a team and you're a fan of a team that blows lead almost every single game, it has to drive you nuts. And also, I would maybe even make the comparison with the San Jose Earthquakes as well under Luchi Gonzalez of how they also or a team that constantly blow leads, and I can tell you how much it just kind of almost pull my hair out every time that happened. I can't imagine what Sporting KC fans are going through with just seeing their team doing this every single game to a point where I think right now maybe some Sporting KC fans are even realizing that yeah, with all the blown leads that they have so far, it's getting to a point where they can only they break your heart for so long until you're just kind of almost numb to the pain, and it's kind of almost expected that you're gonna blow a lead or even give up a late goal to lose a game, just like what we saw in the last game against RSL. Then moving on into the next team, and we talk about the Galaxy. Yeah, I think the Galaxy are right here, where I think they're still doing well. Though I will say that the last couple of games they have regressed, and part of that it is due to you know the last game they did rest some of their players, so that's why they didn't play relatively well, and then of course they were before that they were playing in one in probably the worst performance that they had against Austin FC on the road. So they definitely have slowed down at least in the last couple of games. But still, I think this team is a good team, and I think this is a team that I think could compete in the Western Conference, especially the attacking power that this Galaxy team has. I mean, this team with just so much attacking talent that they have, this team I would not be surprised could be up there in terms of finishing with the most goal in MLS this season. Obviously, we know all know who's probably going to finish the most goal so far this season because the team that is leading that category is basically leading by a country mile, and we'll talk about that team in just a bit. But yeah, again, this is a team that I think will compete as long as if they can solve their defensive issue, and also not to mention their set piece defending issue that they have. I mean, it's hard to believe, but they have right now can see the most goal out of any team from a set piece, and that defense still not very good. But that's kind of just the story of the Galaxy, isn't it, for the past couple of years, and that's also kind of the reason why I would say that if you want to talk about one of the most entertaining team to watch, it's got to be the LA Galaxy right now. Now, if you're a Galaxy fan, I don't know, you would like to see that, unless you of course are winning games, which they have done. But yeah, if you want to see a team, and if you want to watch a game that you expect to have some entertaining soccer, you watch a Galaxy game because that's always gonna bring they always bring some entertainment left and right. Then we go to LAFC. Yeah, they're kind of right here where it's been a bit mediocre and it's kind of a bit confusing because, at point in the beginning of the season, it was a disastrous start and then it kind of got better and now it isn't. So it's kind of confusing because it's been very inconsistent. Now, obviously, part of that may be due to the lack of roster depth and not to mention some of their players on this team is kind of underachieving, and also some bad luck that is suffer. I mean, I'll tell you what, Denise Bwanga, as much as I know this is kind of kind of beat to death the fact that he's been having a season that isn't is kind of almost a little bit of shell of his old self compared to last year. The underlying number have just shown that he is way underperforming his goal expected rate. In fact, he I think still leads the league in terms of the most posts hit this season. The bottom line is this attack has been very unlucky, and that we'll see as the season goes along, and especially with the way that adding Olivier Giroud, that will definitely maybe help their situation with the number 9, because again the team still struggle in terms of the goal scoring department. And then on the other end, on the defensive front, yeah, it's been rough to see, and especially with Hugo Lloris as well. Oh boy, it's been a rough season for Hugo Lloris, and that this is again, LAFC. This is where they might have made a big mistake of deciding to let go of Maxime Crepeau, and this is not the first time we've seen maybe some arrogance started to kind of get into LAFC, especially from John Forrington. The fact that he was thinking, well, let's get the more sexier name and get the bigger well name in Hugo Lloris, and even though I know Hugo Lloris has done very well for Tottenham and even with the French national team. You can start to see this season. This is where not only he started to hit a decline, but man, he's been having a really rough season. And again, we'll see whether if he can bounce back. They better hope that is the case because while Maxime Crepeau is definitely doing relatively well during his time for the Portland Timbers, maybe see another Chicho Arango situation where LAFC maybe decided to move on from a guy that was already very good for the team, but they just want to move on because maybe they want to get a more sexier pick, or maybe just kind of an arrogant kind of mindset that well we're gonna get even better with with a new piece, even though that's not the case whatsoever. Then we go to Inter Miami. Yeah, they're all automatically going to be right here. And I know Inter Miami, there is definitely that issue with the defense, and not to mention, if Messi and all his friends doesn't stay healthy, or mostly Messi doesn't play for this team. This Miami team definitely is not the same all over. But I will say that I think in some way they're very similar to the Galaxy, where high end talent is basically carrying this team. The high end talent is definitely mask all the issue that they have on the defensive front, and this is why when you look at the goals that they have scored the most goal out of anybody, and it's not even close. The defense though has they also have conceded a lot of goals, but again that it doesn't really matter because when you have high end talent like Inter Miami has had and have the greatest player of all time, you don't care how bad your defense is and how bad at times that they of course play even when they don't have Messi and his friends there. Now, of course, we'll see whether or not is this going to contribute them of winning the supporter shield. I don't think so. I've heard a lot of experts have said the fact that this team is going to compete for supporter shield and they potentially will go deep to win MLS Cup. I think they could go deep in terms of making MLS Cup as long as their high end talent stay healthy and is there. But supporter shield, I don't think so because again, once Messi does go to Argentina for Copa America and once they do start losing some pieces due to international duty or even injury itself because this team has also been hit hard with injury. That's why they've signed a lot of players in terms of replacing seeing some of these players that is currently injured. Yeah, we'll see whether or not if they can continue to this good pace that they're currently on right now. And also not to mention, even though they're first in the Eastern Conference, they have played the most game out of anybody. So there are some teams that have a lot of games in hand, and don't be surprised if those teams get the game in hand, and maybe if Miami does hit a little bit snag, especially during the summertime when they don't have their best player. That's when they maybe start to fall off a bit. Then we go to Minnesota. Yeah, same place, Minnesota right here. Again, it's been an incredible season for the Loons, and they're doing it in pretty much the complete opposite of what I thought that they were. Heading into this season, there was a lot of concern about them them kind of starting season with an interim head coach, and there's no direction, and not to mention just getting a new GM in there very late in the year, and then of course with the recent debut of Eric Ramsey and not really having a very long time to get the structure to this team. And I argue he's still working on that as the season goes along. And not to mention, I think the elephant in the room is Reynoso. Basically, is becoming no show right now for the second consecutive season. You would have told me all those kind of factor has played with Minnesota, and this team is second in the Western Conference. I would say that is absolutely insane, and that is not possible. That's where they are right now. They're second in the Western Conference. Again, a lot of these young guys have stepped up. I talked about many times of Minnesota games of how this is really one of the first time I've seen a team that is carried by the youth. A lot of time, this team has been carried by some high end talent, mostly Reynoso, that is. But this is really the first time I've seen the youth really take over this team. I mean, pretty much the greatest example is Tani Oloshai. I mean, he is definitely giving me Mason Toy kind of vibe, but maybe even better Mason Toy vibe as well. I mean, I know Mason Toy had a great run for this team a couple of years ago, but I would argue maybe Oloshai if he continued the goal scoring rate that he is, which is just an absolutely insane rate right now that he's scoring goals per minute. Yeah, somebody tells me that this team might have just found their number nine, and that again, not to also mention some of their veteran attacking pieces like Timu Puki and Long Wane hasn't really hit well this season. And you have guys like some Ben and Robin Ludd, who again I think Robin Ludd is really the answer to this team. It's no surprise that this team has done so much better this season compared to last year when they missed him throughout the season. And this is also why I mentioned when he did came off with an injury at halftime the last game against Atlanta. I'm a little concerned and hope that he's okay because he's really the engine. He's pretty much becoming the new Reynoso, so and really took over for that role. And let's just hope that he, of course, is okay because again, this team, I would say that kind of like Austin, they're basically really playing over their mind a little bit and kind of exceed expectation and exceed underlying number. But unlike Austin, I think this could be sustainable, especially the one again Eric Ramsey still kind of working on in terms of getting his tactics and getting the best out of this team. If that of course continue, this team could maybe even be competing in the Western Conference. Even though this year I thought this was a transitional year for this team. Then we move on to Nashville because what we already did Montreal kind of went out of order. And for Nashville, yeah, it's definitely not having a good time. I mean, besides the last game that where they got a much needed win against Montreal, and keep in mind this was a Montreal team that were injured to hell. It has not been a great season for Nashville SC. I mean, we already talked about the attack being a big issue. Hani Mukhtar has been pretty much a shell of his old self. They don't really have a legitimate goal scorer order. Even Sam Surridge has been kind of on and off throughout the season, though he was definitely on in the last game when he scored the hat trick. But uh, a thing that I will say about Nashville that's kind of also similar to what I say about FC Dallas. I think as much as I know some people are concerned about the attack for Nashville, it's the defense that is a huge concern and a huge red flag if you're a Nashville SC fan. I mean, this team has always built on their defense. That's been their DNA ever since they came into the league. This is probably the worst defense I've seen this season for Nashville, and that's where there's got to be a lot of concern if you're a Nashville SC fan. And it's not a surprise too. I mean, when you look at some of the turnover that they had and some of the pieces and the players are that are anchoring that defensive front, it's definitely not as good as some of the players that have departed for this team. And as a result, when you add all that into factor, it's still surprised Nashville has not been great this year because of it. But again, the bottom line is that if you're in Nashville, they have to get Hani Mukhtar going. I mean, they have to hope that Hani Mukhtar, from what we saw in the last game, is the Hani Mukhtar that we're gonna that they might see as the season goes along. Because again, it's been a miserable start for this Nashville team, and Gary Smith knows it too because I mentioned he's on kind of the chopping block a little bit. He could be if this bad run kind of continues. Then we go to New England. Yeah, it's pretty easy for New England. It's obviously right here. It's been a disastrous season for the Revs. I mean, there's really not much I have to explain about New England and how whatever Caleb Porter is doing to this team is clearly not work. And I'll also say this: yes, they're still battling some injuries and still trying to get some of their best player back into this team. But the fact that they have looked so bad this season, despite the fact that they clearly have talent in this team, and the fact that Caleb Porter has just not only not got the best out of this team, but just whatever he's doing has just clearly not worked and has taken a complete 180 to what Bruce Arena has got the best out of this team. That has got to be a huge concern if you're New England, and that I don't see if things are going to change. I mean, yes, they have definitely made some signings, some reinforcement. I mean, bring Ivasic in the goalkeeping spot. Maybe we'll put a band-aid in terms of their issue in the goalkeeping spot, and also not to mention bring Derek Etienne Jr., a guy that this would have been a great signing if it was a couple of years ago. I still think it could be a good signing, but he's definitely not as good as what we saw in a couple of years ago. Maybe that will help this team a little bit. The bottom line is that yeah, this team is clearly underachieving this year, and unless they don't turn things around, Caleb Porter is definitely going to be maybe one of the first one to be let go from this New England side. Then we go to the New York Red Bulls. I think they're still doing well, the Red Bulls, but obviously there are some signs of concern, I would say, for this team. I mean, they got off to a hot start to the season, but they have definitely slowed down a little bit, and I think most part of that is the attack kind of have slowed down a little bit compared to in the beginning of the season where Lewis Morgan was really carrying this team, and even Emil Forsberg also kind of carrying this team as well. Not to mention Dante Van Zier also has for once performed to the rate that they were hoping for. But again, those guys kind of have slowed down a little bit. And then, of course, we saw what happened in the last game against Inter Miami, where they were just getting blown apart on the defensive front. Now, I will say that besides that game, I think this Red Bulls team overall, their defensive number and their underlying number on that front is still pretty good. But yeah, that game against Inter Miami, they better hope that that was just because they face against the best attack in the league. And anytime when you face against Inter Miami, I mean, you maybe give a pass in terms of how your defense play against those kind of world class player that Inter Miami has had. But The Red Bulls are hoping that that is the case, because if that's not the case, and if their defense is going to continue to struggle, then there could be some red flags if you're a Red Bulls fan, because again, we know that the attack could be hot and cold at time, but if this defense is not doing very well, that's when they can start to slip down in the standings. Then we go to NYCFC. Yeah, I think they're right here where it's been a bit of a confusing season, a bit mediocre. I mean, they had that bad start to the beginning of the year, and everybody was saying Nick Cushing looks like he's going to be the first to be fired. And then they had a great run in terms of that 5 game home stretch. Except don't look at the last game against Colorado where they basically lay an egg in that game. So overall, I would say it's been a bit mediocre. Again, some of these new pieces that they have, it's been okay at times. It's been not okay at, at, at time. I mean, the defense has been all right at time, and even on the attacking front has been all right at time, mainly because if Santi Rodriguez is feeling it and basically carrying this team on the attacking front, but there's no doubt that they need to do more as the season goes along. They're really hoping some of these young pieces that they had is going to continue to develop to a point where they're going to start to reach the potential that they did, especially in the latter part of last season. And we'll see whether or not if that is going to be the case. I mean, the good thing about NYCFC is that at least as much of the mediocre season that they have this year, at least getting off to a better start this season compared to last year. And that's, I think, maybe is a bit of a positive for NYCFC fans, but some will say that yeah, that's not really too much of a positive when we were heard that with the signings that we made and the reinforcement that we made, this team should be better, and we're still saying that Nick Cushing is pretty much the guy that is kind of holding this team back in terms of being a team that should be looking like the NYCFC team of the old just a couple of years ago. Then we go to Orlando City. Yeah, it's got to be right here. I mean, it is kind of panic time for Orlando fans. I mean, their attack has just completely stalled in these last couple of games. Well, there were maybe one or two games where the attack kind of found some form, but for the most part, their attack has just been completely stalled. And on the defensive front, oh boy, their defense has been bad night and day, and part of that is mainly because I would also say that Pedro Galese, you talk about goalkeeper this season that's been having a bit of a mediocre season and has looked like a shell of their old self. I think you can say that Pedro Galese, say Martin Paus, and even as I'll get to Andre Blake, just really having a season that looked like and is considered to be one of those three as some of the top 5 or even top 10 goalkeeper in this league. And add to the fact that when you have a team that can't score, it's no wonder why Orlando City is really struggling right now, both home and away. And if things doesn't turn around, this is going to be a very disappointing season. And I even mentioned Oscar Pereira, a guy that is on the chopping block. I know he signed a new contract, but if he continued to underperform, especially with the talent that they have right now in disposal, yeah, this is going to go down as one of the most disappointing season, probably right up there in terms of their first five season as the most disappointing season. Kind of maybe similar to when they won like the off season champion, I think back in 2017 or 18, and they just completely crap the bed because all those pieces that they got turns out to be huge boss and didn't really perform the rate that they should be. Then we go to the Philadelphia Union. Yeah, it's a bit mediocre right now and slash confusing, and a part of that is because the last couple of games, ever since they ended that unbeaten run that they got, it has not been great for this Union team, and in some ways it's been very inconsistent too, where they had that good run. Well, they had a bad run to start the season, and then they had a good run, and now they're back to having a bit of a bad and mediocre run and actually are losing game. I think the more alarming thing, if you're Chip Curran and this Union team, and certainly this Union fan base, starting to lose games at home. That is a very un-Union like kind of thing to do of them losing at home. This is a team that just never lose at home. Subaru Park is probably the toughest place right now, besides Bank of California Stadium or BMO Field as it is now call, or BMO Stadium, as it called now, as the toughest place to get points, but that's has not really been the case, at least in the last two home games. So there's no doubt that this Union team need to find some form. And I think part of the issue for this Union team and why they have been struggling isn't really because of the attack. I think the attack has done well. It's the defense. The defense has not been great this season, and add to the fact that, as mentioned, Andre Blake just have not looked like his old self. Also, spent time on the injuries list. Oliver Similar at times looked like he was the better option, but he's kind of taper off recently. And not to mention the defense again. This is a team that for years on past is considered to be one of the best defensive team in the league, if not the best defensive team in the league. And the fact that they have really regressed this season, that has to be a huge concern for Jim Curran and this Union team. Then we go to the Portland Timbers. Yeah, I would say it's kind of right here where it's kind of bit mediocre and also confused, though I'm pretty sure Timbers fan will say that they're kind of like right around this category where it's just been a disaster season, at least after getting off to a good start. The reason why I will say that it hasn't that they're definitely not at that category of definitely not having a good time is that during this winless run that they have under Phil Neville, there are some promising moment, and not to mention that free nothing comeback that they had against Sporting KC. I know it's Sporting KC, and I know they blow leads, but that is still very impressive. The problem is that for the Timbers, I think this season it's kind of similar to what we seen in previous season. The defense is absolutely horrendous, and again, it's no surprise that last season when they didn't address this, and even the previous season when they didn't address this, that this defense is just being very bad right now. I mean, not even Maxime Crepeau, who I mentioned that Crepeau has done well for the Timbers. I would like to take that back because he hasn't really played the same level that he was doing his time with LAFC. But a part of that is because his back line just completely hung him out to dry. I mean, there's been time where this Timbers defense, I would argue, is probably one of the worst defensive team in the league. And when you have a team that is super bad in terms of defensive front, unless you're the Galaxy who has high end talent, in the same case with Inter Miami, that's not going to bail you out in terms of getting restored. And while the Timbers team definitely have talent on the attacking end, I think Evander has been having a good season. So far this season, their most recent signing, in Jonathan Capacita Rodriguez, he's still trying to get himself going, doing his early days with the Timbers. Again, while the attack has been good, the defense has been not, and that's gotta have to fix if they want to end this winless run. I mean, honestly, the way to end this winless run is just win a game. I mean, I know that sounds a very obvious thing, but when you have a team that goes for a long winless run, it can be a hapless kind of feeling, and that the only way to do it is to win games. Because I have a feeling if the Timbers can end this winless run, there could be a chance where they could go on a bit of a run, as long as their defense can hold tight, which that is a huge if with this team. Then we go to RSL. Yeah, I mean RSL is definitely right here, and I know yes they had a very disappointing U.S. Open Cup run, as they got knocked off in the last round against New Mexico United, which is just kind of another example to show you the magic of the U.S. Open Cup that some MLS team is definitely missing out on. But also, besides that, it's just been an incredible season for this RSL team, and not to mention Chicho Arango. I mean, he's pretty much making LAFC and certainly their fans wishing that they have him back, because I'm pretty sure that if Chicho Arango was still with LAFC maybe be competing with Inter Miami right now in term so being who's the team that's compete for supporter shield. But to RSL credit, they are definitely reaping the reward, and I think the more encouraging sign you got to say about this RSL team, they're not collapsing. In terms of how they're formed, despite the fact that Pablo Ruiz went down with a season-ending injury. I mean, last season we saw how when he went down with a season-ending injury, this team just completely collapsed. We're not seeing that this season, and I think that's got to be me encouraging, and also just kind of a test to the depth that this team has had, and not to mention like what we saw last season, this team is incredibly good on the road. I mean, I'm pretty sure this is the team I think along with Minnesota is probably the road warriors of MLS because both of these teams have so far won the most road game this season, and even though their home form has, I mean, their home form has actually been better at least in the last couple of games. Because of that, they're right now in the top of the Western Conference. Though again, with the way that the West is a little bit tight in the beginning of the season, and there's a bit of a long jam between that spot. We'll see whether or not if that of course continue. Though I have a feeling it will continue. I mean, as long as if Chicho Arango continued to score goals and challenge Messi for that MVP award, yeah, this RSL team is going to be in good hands. Then we go to Seattle. Yeah, I mean, for the Sounders, it's kind of right here where it's been a, it's definitely not been a great time to be a Seattle Sounders fan. I mean, this season there was so much promise with new addition of Pedro de la Vega. He got injured, and there's still no timeline of when exactly he's going to come back, and they're probably praying that he's going to be back anytime soon because they desperately need a huge inject of energy on this attacking end. And I even said before that even though with Joao Paulo being back in this team, while it definitely have helped in terms of their defensive front, because João Paulo definitely is considered one of the best number six in the league and really can cover the back line. He doesn't he doesn't really contribute that much on the attacking end if you don't have more attacking uh, some more good attacking pieces on this team. And he's kind of almost, I would say, kind of like a starter in terms of starting the attack, and eventually you have some high end talent like we've seen with previous Sounders team with Ladero kind of pulling the string. Well, Ladero is no longer there, and again, when you look at this team in terms of his replacement, Albert Rusnak as a big example, it's been another disastrous start to the season, and you're starting to get to a point where he maybe is not the Ladero answer that they hope for, and I think they probably know it. This is why they desperately need Pedro de la Vega back to this team, but e- even with him back in this team, and even though we're trading water right now, it's kind of hard to believe how bad this attack has, and also not to mention in terms of the tactics itself. I mentioned how Brian Schmetzer maybe on the hot seat a little bit, and that's kind of quite insane to say a couple of years ago, but that's kind of the case. I mean, his tactics has not been great great whatsoever, and kind of outdated at times, and that's kind of what you get with the Seattle Sounder right now. Just look like a slow old kind of team, and a team that just only not scoring a lot of goals, but also not winning a lot of games as well. Then we go to St. Louis. Yeah, it's been a bit of a mediocre and kind of a confusing season. I would say that confusing maybe might not be the right word, but also a very frustrating season too. Because if you're a St. Louis fan, you can see that there are talent on this team. That is if they will show up at time, because it's been very inconsistent, and that they've been drawing a lot of games as a result sort of that, and that in some ways I would say that they're kind of similar to what we saw with Nashville a couple of years ago, drawing a lot of games, and they can definitely see that the talent is there, especially on the attack, but it just have never really hit full cylinder, at least for most of these games. So we'll see whether or not if that, of course, is going to change, especially on the attacking end. I mean, we knew that this team was going to suffer a bit of a regression, and we're definitely start to seeing it heading into the second season. What I didn't imagine is the fact that they would be drawing so many games and playing this kind of very inconsistent and at times even frustrating brand of soccer that this team is playing this season. Then we go to Toronto FC. Yeah, they have to be right here. I mean, again, the fact that Toronto is in a playoff conversation, you would have told me that in the beginning of the season, and we're one third in the season. I would You would absolutely laugh at me. And even a couple of weeks when they kind of looked like reality was starting to set in, they're still winning games. I mean, again, this is all credit to what John Herman has done, and I mentioned it before. Oh, how good of a job that John Herman has done to this team. He's done an incredible job, and definitely could be considered to be coach of the year this year. Even though I probably think that he's not going to win it, because you usually the coach of the year is awarded to the team that has the best record and win the support ratio. But what he has done to this team and a team that is supposed to be going through a rebuild right now. It's just absolutely incredible. In some way, I would say it's similar to Minnesota of how they're supposed to go through a transitional and a deep rebuild. But I would argue it's even more impressive than what Minnesota is doing because again, this team is supposed to be a bottom feeder. This team should not be good this season. It's supposed to be a cakewalk for most of the team, and yeah, that's not been the case. I mean, it's been well, and I will say that eventually maybe things will slow down and again we saw a couple of games ago where maybe wheels will start to come off a bit. But if that is the case, and even if this is kind of the trend that they're going to go, where they are going to be going for a bit of a rough period, they will bounce back in a strong way. The team is going to make it to the playoffs, and that has just already exceeded expectation. I mean, if you want to talk about probably the most surprising team this season right now, it's got to be Toronto FC, and it's not even been close. I mean, I know some people will say Austin and maybe Minnesota, but what Toronto has done this season, I don't think anyone saw it coming whatsoever. And then we go to the Vancouver Whitecaps. I think they're still doing well, though. Again, the problem with the Whitecaps is that again the reason why they haven't been getting a lot of recognition is because they've been having a relatively easy schedule and they haven't really beat anyone good. And I think until they do start to beat someone good and make a statement win, that's when they maybe get into the conversation of potentially being a Western Conference contender. I mean, they had their chance against the Galaxy, and in some way they had their chance against Austin too, because Austin has been relatively hot coming into their last matchup. They lost the game against the Galaxy, and they drew a very frustrating resort against Austin FC at home. Those are kind of the resort that if they want to be considered to be Western Conference contender and maybe even get the national media to really recognize that hey, this is a team that is very good and can really compete with the best of the team. They need to make those statement wins. But besides that, I think they've been doing a great job. And again, I will also praise them in terms of the fact that again I said about this Whitecaps team, yes, they have an easy schedule, but don't tell that to Vanni Sartini. You just say that, well, we can only play against who we face, and it's not our fault the fact that we start the season with so many easy opponent. We're just taking advantage of it, which is something that you don't usually see happen. Like not every team in this league, when they have an easy schedule, they take advantage of it. In fact, more times or not, they don't take advantage of it, and it comes back to bite them once they have got through the harder part of the schedule. But for the Whitecaps, we'll see once they do get to the harder part of the schedule, will they continue to sustain this good form? If they can, again, this is when I think that they'll maybe be considered to be a Western Conference contender. But there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of me looking at all 29 teams and looking at all their 29 fan base to see how they feel as we're now into a third of the season in this emotion index. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. And also let me know in the comments below, did I put some team a little bit too high or put some team a little bit too low? But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video and I will see you guys next time.